Yeah, so continuing with our Matplotlib session. In this session, we are going to cover the pie chart. So what we have done is we have read the data from a file called as sachin.xls. This basically contains data regarding centuries scored by Sachin in his career against different teams in ODI and the test matches. So it covers the score he made against which country in the which particular format, test matches or ODI, and on which ground and on which particular date. So this is what we have. We have captured the data in a data frame called as Sachin, and we have already covered one bar in the previous session, which was about basically comparison of centuries scored by him in against different countries in ODI versus test matches. Now, what we want to do is we want to make a pie chart. Basically, the idea is to find out how many centuries he scored against each of the countries. That is total centuries he scored, including both one days and test matches against each country, and we want to display that distribution in the form of a pie chart. So this is what the output what we are looking for. That is, he scored 20% of his career centuries against Australia, 17% against Sri Lanka. So what actually happened? He scored overall 100 centuries. So in a way, it becomes very easy to come up with the numbers. Okay, because since everything was 100, so it is just so whatever centuries he scored against that country actually became that much percentage. So simple as that. So let's see how we achieve this, making this pie chart. So to start with, first. What I have done, I have just using that data frame df. I'm grouping using the two variables or the two columns against and centuries. So against is the name of the country against which he scored a centuries, and centuries is the total number of centuries he scored. So this data frame df I had actually created earlier. So how did I create this data frame? Let me just quickly go through it. So what I did, so this is the df. So df basically is a data frame that I created, grouping on the basis of format and against, and counting the length of the score, that is the number of centuries scored in a given format against a given country. So the output was something like this, where we had the number of centuries scored by Sachin against a given country in a given format. So that's how we created the df data frame. So we are just using the same df data frame. Now, from this df data frame, we are now interested in the total number of centuries he scored against a given country. We are just now uh, ignoring the format. uh, so that's why we are doing the further group by. So if you see here, we are just doing the group by on the df data frame based on the column against. So it will group against. So it will create the groups based on the country name, and for the centuries column we have to aggregate, that is how many centuries were scored against a given country. That's what we are doing, is an aggregate, calling np.sum function, and then I'm just sorting in on the basis of descending order. That is, I want the country against which he scored the maximum centuries should appear at the top, uh, and followed by the next country against which he scored the centuries. So that's why I'm specifying ascending order as false. So I'm storing the result in this total centuries, so which is basically a series. So if I just display it, its output looks like this. So this is the centuries he had scored in his career, including both one days and test matches, and this is the country name against that country he scored. Sachin scored that many centuries. Now, this is fine. We see in the form of a table. Now we want to visualize the same information in a pie chart. So how do we do this? We again start with the plt.subplots, and we are specifying the figure size of 6 by 6. We want it to be absolutely circular, and we again, this is fig represents the figure, ax represents the axis. Now we are just using this function ax.pi. So pi is the function which actually used to make a pie plot. We have to specify the values. So the values are actually stored in total centuries. This is a series that we created here. Yeah, after the group by. So this actually represents the data or the values, and then we have to give the labels. So corresponding to each value, what is the label that is against which country he scored that many centuries. So since in the series, the name of the country was actually the index of that particular series, so I'm specifying labels as this particular series name dot index. So that will give the country's name. Now, instead of depicting the value as the actual value, I want it to be represented as in the form of percentage. So that's why I'm using this auto percentage parameter of this function and specifying the percentage format, that is the percentage should appear in the end and there should be one value after the decimal place. And then I'm specifying the start angle as a 90 degrees. So the first line that gets created should be at the 90 degree. It should be like straight line followed by the successive lines depending upon the values the angles get created. And I've specified counterclock as false, that is it should display the chart in the clockwise direction instead of the counterclockwise. So since whenever we do a plotting, the function returns an object. So here it is returning the object, and I am capturing this object in pi wedge collection. So basically these are the wedges. So I'm just storing it in a variable called as pi wedge collection. The main idea to store this return object in another in a, in an object so that we can further specify some functionality or some properties and do some further manipulation on the chart. Now, in this case, if we do not do this, what we'll get a pie plot. But what we also want is we want to distinguish each pie of a pie plot by setting the color of this particular edge of each pie. So what I'm saying is here is in this pie wedge collection, just loop through it. That is loop through each of these wedges and set the edge color of each wedge as the white. So I'm just using this function dot set underscore edge color, and the color I'm specifying here is white. So it will set the edge color as white. And then this plt dot type layout, it will make sure that the layout is in a proper format. And using plt dot show, I'm displaying the graph. So if you see here, again, we can come to know that overall his career, he scored 20% of his centuries against Australia, followed by 17% against Sri Lanka, 12% against South Africa, 9% against New Zealand and England both, 8% Zimbabwe, and so on. So more or less, this was the similar kind of information we displayed earlier. Here, these were two different bars in which there was a comparison of ODIs and Test centuries against each country. We could have easily find out the total also from here, but if you want to display it in the form of a pie chart, that is the another way to represent it. So it means so bulk of his centuries came from Australia, which is again one of the best countries in the Test cricket. So it means he scored quality runs against a quality team. Continuing further. Now, now the question is, whenever Sachin has scored a century, we want to find out how big that century was. That is, whenever he reached that 100 runs milestone, we want to find out after reaching that milestone, how long he was able to continue further in that particular innings. That is, how much he was able to convert that century into a bigger century. Like, did he get out like immediately after scoring 100, like 101, 102, or 110, or did he actually make it count and really made a big one after scoring that century, that is after reaching that milestone. So that's a question that we have and we want to answer it. Now, to start with, first have a look at the data frames. So Sachin is a data frame that we had created. Now, one thing to note in that data frame, I'm just quickly scrolling up. You see, this is a score column, and in the score column, asterisks were present. So basically, these were representing that okay, he was not out in that particular innings. Now, because of the presence of these asterisks, this particular column is actually not a numeric column anymore, and because of this, we cannot perform any arithmetic calculation on it. So what we have to do, we have to first get rid of this asterisk and convert this column into a numeric column. Then we can perform the arithmetic operations on it. So what I'm doing here is I'm just replacing. Such as a data frame, I'm selecting this column score and using this replace function. And what I'm saying is that the regex should be true. That is, I'm specifying a regular expression to replace that asterisk. In place equals to true means that whatever changes should happen, it should happen within the data frame. That is, it should get saved within the data frame. So what I'm trying to replace is anything which is not a number. So this is a way to specify the regular expression, that is 0 to 9, and this caret indicates the opposite of it, that is anything which is not a number should get replaced by this empty bracket. That is, so anything which is not a number, it means if there is a star or by any chance any other character is coming along with number, we have to replace it with a with empty string. So it will remove all the, in our case we had only asterisk for the not out innings, so all those asterisks will get removed. So that is one thing. Now even after removing those asterisks, by default it will not change the data type of the column, so we have to explicitly go on and change the data type of that column. So what we are doing here is we are just changing the data type of the column and making it as integers by saying Sachin, and the name of the column is score, and saying convert it into integer, so using dot s type, which is a function, and in which type we have to convert, we are saying integer, so it will get converted into integer. And again, the results I'm storing back in the original column. So now this column is actually an integer column. So so our requirement was to basically find out how big uh, Sachin was able to convert his centuries after reaching that milestone. So basically, we want to find out whenever this is the figure that this is the chart that we want to prepare. So if so first we just quickly go through it. So let's say he scored 100 and 110. So these are basically bars and basically histograms in which each bar represents, if you see this width of the bar represents he scored between 100 and 110, and this represents 110 to 120 and so on. So each bar actually represents a range of value. In our case, the range of score he made. So this bar was in the range of 100 to 110. This bar was in the range of 110 to 120, 120 to 130, and so on. So so, and the height of this bar basically is depicting the frequency. That is, uh, 22 times in his career, when Sachin reached 100, he was out between 100 and 110. So, so that's the highest for him. Now, there were 19 instances when he made runs more than 110, and he got out within the range of 110 and 120. So 19 times he did like that. So this way we can find out, okay, after reaching that century milestone, uh, how many times he got out early, and how many times he was able to play for the longer innings and converted that century into a bigger century. So this is actually a histogram. So let's see how do we achieve this to get this particular graph. So we are starting with, again, by saying plt dot subplots, again capturing the figure and the axes. Now I have to create the bin list. So okay, because this data contains uh, all the data, all the centuries is scored by Sachin. So obviously it starts with at least 100, and it goes up to whatever maximum score was scored by Sachin in his career. I'm just adding plus 10, and then I'm specifying a jump of 10. So basically, this bin list will create a list in the form of 100, 210, 120, 130, 140, that kind of bins it will create. So this bin is nothing but actually a range uh, of numbers, and it will go up to the whatever maximum score Sachin did plus 10. Now we are actually doing this the plotting of the graph by saying ax.hist, which is the histogram. What we want to specify in the histogram is the values. So just use Sachin's score. So Sachin score is used to create that histogram, and the bins, that is the range of each bin should come from this particular bin list. That is what we had created earlier, and the edge color is white. So you see this color, edge color, this should be white of each bar. And again, we are storing the return object into ARR, so we can use it later. Now simply we are just setting the frequency, Y label and X label as frequency underscores, because this represents the frequency in the histogram, and on the X-axis we have this scores, and setting the title as the frequency distribution of 100 plus a score made by Sachin. Another thing to note, we are also depicting uh, the frequency at the top of each histogram. So what we are doing here is we are just simply written a one small for loop where we are just looping through a range. Uh, this basically is a kind of an index, you can say. So bin list. So we are finding out the length of the bin list in -1. So that's how index will start from 20, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And we had captured the output in the ARR object. So using that ARR, we are just indexing it for first and 0th row and that particular column depending upon this I value, and this will help us to find out the x-axis and the y-axis. And once it finds out, okay, this is x-axis and the y-axis, then we have to put a text. So what text should be put? This is the text that should be displayed, and we are just displaying the text using plt.text function. So it will display the text at the top of each of the bars. So we see that I think around so basically whenever Sachin reached 100, this is what this graph suggests. He was a very high number of times out within the score of 100 to, let's say, 120. So means so if I say it's 22 and 19 is 41. So out of his 100 centuries, so 41% of his centuries were like that. He couldn't make it into a big one. He just was out within the score of 100 to 120. And if I just increase the range to slightly 120 to 130, then this figure goes very high. So from 41 to 46, and 56% means 56% of the times he was out between 100 and 130. So that is probably one of the reasons why people say that uh, somehow, I mean, people prefer Lara over Sachin because Lara was able to convert his centuries into the bigger centuries. Uh, so yeah, and there was I think two occasions where he went past around 240. Yeah, he scored a couple of double centuries also. If we see here, three here, two here, and similarly two. So around there have been seven instances when he passed 200 landmark. But overall, a majority of the times he was out within the range of 100 to 130. So continuing further now, this is done. Now, basically, our next requirement is to display the number of centuries Sachin has scored in that particular year. That is total number of centuries he scored in 1 days plus test matches in that particular year. So this is the kind of the thing we want to display. So in the data frame we had one date column, but it actually was not in the date format. It was in the string format. So we had converted first into the date time format using pd.datetime. And what I've done is then we just simply extracted year from that particular date using Sachin and then the name of the column date and using .dt.year, capturing it in another column as year. Now, based on the year, I'm just doing the group by and counting the number of centuries scored in that particular year. And then it's simple. Just we have to do the bar plot in which we are just first creating the index and then using ex.bar specifying the index and the centuries is scored for that respective index. This actually index represents that year, and then we are setting the ticks for each index and then the labels, which label is nothing but the year, and rotating that year by 90 degree. So if you see, all these values are 90 degree, and then just setting the y label in the title. So if you see, such as career, he was very dominant in 1998, where he scored a maximum number of centuries in both one days and test matches in that particular year, around 12 something. So this particular area of his career, yeah, I mean 96, 97, 98, 99, yeah, if I, yeah, so these 96 to 99, he was very much successful in terms of scoring the centuries. And later, if you see again back in 2008, 2009, 2010, he did very well. 2010 especially, he came back to his best. So that's how we can use different visualization charts to extract the information and present it in a way so that people can really make sense out of it, rather than just showing the numbers in the form of the tables. So I think visual representation is one of the best means to extract the information and display it to the users. That's it for now. Thank you.